Hello, my name is Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and today, what I want to do is talk about education, university education, because, of course, I leverage my education when I'm discussing American presidents. You do not need a university education to study and understand and be able to analyze. American presidents like I do, right? You don't need a university education for it. There are many things you do not need a university education for, but uh, to be clear, I'm doing this video specifically um to discuss the benefits of a university education for me. One of the things I benefited from having a university education. Of course, I came to America originally to obtain a university education, an American education. I had a university education before I came to America. I already had one from Nigeria, which was excellent. It was in history. It was excellent. It was in the comfort of the country my parents were in, my family was in, my friends, people I knew. So that was comfortable, right? And I read, we had libraries. You can't read all the books in the library, right? But I was known to live in the library virtually, right? I had a seat. I was the first to get to the library. I had my seat by 7 a.m., the time when it was opened, and I left at night. Apart from going for my classes, I was, when I was done with classes or anytime I was not in class, I was always found at my seat in the library. I think the library would close at 11 p.m. or whatever, and so I was there from morning to night. I loved reading, and that's how I was able to get into reading so many books in the library, right? Reading so many different books, right? So you don't need. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is the cost of education. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm seeing um, the U.S. government shut down on international education, right? And it's international education has been weaponized against, well-meaning internationals who want to study in America, and they contribute in the diversity of understanding of the world, in American understanding of the international world, people from different cultures. But I learned that Nigerian F1 immigration visas, non-immigrant visas to international students in Nigeria has been shut down temporarily. Right, they can't come to study in the U.S. right now, and which is a huge blow because Nigerians, of course, were known to love education. In fact, in America, Nigerians are recognized as amongst the most educated ethnic uh, groups in America today, right? Nigerian Americans are known to be the most amongst the most educated. There was actually a time they were dubbed by a magazine, was it Aussie, and it was on Wikipedia that they were the most educated ethnic group, even more educated than Asians generally as a group in terms of their attainment of advanced degrees, professions, and things like that, and the possession amongst their numbers, the proportion of them that had bachelor's degrees and whatnot. So yes, but Nigerian Americans do know, they're known for acquiring degrees and loving to go to school, going to school, and this has been shut down. Um, you know, I again, I'm doing this because of course, I love education, but I do not like the path that education is. The path for the attainment of education is going in America. It's descent, right? There's this descent in American education. It's become more expensive, and we're learning that even people by the time they get in or graduate, they can't even read. There are many students today that can hardly read. They say the quality is dropping. Meanwhile, the cost is more exorbitant. And just to give a picture, right? Of course, I've acquired several degrees. the price tag of the degrees and the education I've garnered is about $1 million. And that's no kidding, right? I graduated from Columbia University. I have a bachelor's, right? Columbia University is one of the most expensive universities in America. I have a Doctor of Law degree, a Juris Doctor from George Washington University Law School. It's also one of the most expensive law schools in America, right? So each one, estimates they each cost about $400,000 each. Columbia University and George Washington University Law School. That's already about $800,000. And I had an MBA and I did undergraduate accounting at Troy University in Troy, Alabama. Today, the cost of attending Troy for 4 years approaches $200,000. So you see, that's $1 million already. That's apart from the initial Nigerian education that I had, and that's apart from my education in Europe. I studied at Bocconi University in Italy. I also studied at Oxford University, where I did an international human rights law program. So yes, the price of my education is $1 million. Um, is that discouraging for anybody who wants to go to school? You don't have to pay that much money, but the cost of education across the board in America is atrociously high now, right? Troy University, like I said, is a public university. It's actually an unknown public university, but the cost is now approaching $200,000 in total to attend a 4 year college. That shouldn't be the case. Personally, I think university education should be free, right? I that's what I desire. That's what I think should be the case. I don't think university education should be treated as a commodity that's whose price is driven by market forces, by supply and demand. I don't think that should be the case because we're educating American citizens as an accountant, from an accountant's perspective. Your citizens should be treated as assets, and you invest in your assets because eventually it's graduates with quality education who are going to work and pay taxes, right? They're going to pay taxes and fill the coffers of the nation. They're the ones who are going to be one day soldiers, right? They're going to enlist in the military, in the defense of the nation, right? We're not yet at the point where we're using robots, and even robots, it's humans, right? It's people who it's citizens who will design, who have the brains to design those robots. Should we reach a state where it's robots that are going to be enlisting in the military in defense of the nation? It's so we have we can't one can't underestimate or exaggerate um, the significance of a nation investing in its people through its education, right? And so that's why I say I think a university education should be free. Um, if people desire to make if there's some people who want to buy their own education, right? They want to invest more money, get a certain type of exclusive education. They're free to do that, right? It's a free country. But for the most part, for most Americans who can't afford it, I think they should have access to free quality university education. And one doesn't have to be in the four walls of a classroom or be ensconced in on a university campus in order to get information, get quality information, because we now have the ubiquity of the internet, right? The internet is brimming with knowledge and information, right? It's all over. You can have it all over the world, and America does a very good job of making internet accessible. So we have many educational resources. You could actually sit in your home and be acquiring all the knowledge that you would have acquired at Harvard or Columbia or MIT. In fact, these universities are now known to make their classes, right? Many of their classes available freely online, right? So, and think about it, the cost of it, of attending these elite schools or universities in America general, right? In general, that's a cost of buying a house, right? So you can see that it discourages a lot of would-be students when they think that, well, the price tag of getting a university degree, that's equivalent to actually owning, what it would cost to own a house in America in a very good neighborhood, right? $1 million house obviously is an excellent home. Now, I'm not going to talk about the returns on investment on the sort of education I acquired. That's not what the purpose of this is. People who go to certain elite universities or acquire certain degrees, well, you can't out earn them, right? Unless you're a genius and you're creating Apple like Steve Jobs was doing, right? You can't out earn these people in terms of what organizations or the government or firms would cutting edge firms would pay them. For instance, I have a law degree. I know people who went into law firms, big law, straight from law school. Their starting salary today is $250,000, just base salary. Not a lot of people can earn that amount, right? It's only people who have a law degree from certain law schools, right, that can go out and earn that type of money, right? So, are there other jobs that you don't need a university degree or you don't need a law degree for to earn that amount? Yes, certainly. There are truck drivers who make six figures, and you don't particularly need a high school diploma to earn a truck, to be a truck driver. Um, but it depends on what your goal is and what your objective in life is. But apart from talking about the price tag, I don't agree with the price tag. I think education should be free, but that's a deeper economic discussion, and I have not gone deep into this matter, right, to be able to put something out there. If I ever were ever to, I would have to do it in writing, do research, or to be able to compare the pros and cons of having free education versus uh, you know making education a commodity driven by market forces of supply and demand. By the way, I gave just the price tag, right? The list price of my education. That's roughly at about $1 million. It would be over that, but I haven't included the opportunity cost, right? So if people who are finance professionals, people in finance and accounting, they factor in, the value of money, right? The value of money includes what you sacrificed, right, to spend that dollar, right? When you spent a dollar, the alternative investment, what you could have used that dollar for instance, if you could have invested it in something else. And there's also the opportunity cost. So by going to university, by going back to school, for instance, because I went back to get my law school after many years, I'd already qualified as a stockbroker. I was licensed. I'd worked as a financial advisor at elite places like Bank of America, Wachovia Securities, which is now Wells Fargo. I'd worked in a variety of places, right? And the cost, right? There's something called an opportunity cost. So the cost of my education, right? Because I was actually now an adult when I went back to school. And initially, even when I went to Columbia University, I was going as a pre-med initially, and then I was a biological science major. I added an engineering because I wanted to go to medical school. That was my objective. But I was giving up a lot. There were things I gave up. The cost of not earning money as a financial advisor, as a stockbroker, or in investment banking, because an investment banking pathway opened to me at the bank I worked in. I had opportunities in sales and trading, different things. Um, Now, I was told when I was hired, the path they put me on, I would have been earning about $500,000 in 4 years. So I gave up earning $500,000 for how many years, right? For 5, 6, 7 years, because it took me. I went back to school. It took maybe another 7 years, 8 years when I went back to school, taking it away from my career path, my professional life. But the thing is, you should do what makes you feel fulfilled, right? I had a desire to become a lawyer. I had a desire to do certain things. And, my goal was not to get this education and stay in America and work and just be going to work, marking time. No. My goal, I had this bigger desire that, okay, the knowledge and skills I was going to acquire, in law school, and at Columbia University, and these other great places I went to school in Europe. I was going to use them in Nigeria, right? I was going to use them uh, internationally, globally, and in Nigeria specifically. I got fortunate that I became an American citizen, and plans changed. I became an American citizen, and plans changed. So there's an opportunity cost apart from the price tag, right, of $1 million of the cost of my education, the value of my education. There's an opportunity cost, what I gave up, but that's a financial calculation, and it might seem more academic, but it's not really academic. It's a reality, right? Because I could have been earning money, right? Uh, but I gave that up. That's called an opportunity cost. So that it's an economic term, explaining what one gives up, right, to do something else, right? So I gave up uh, earning money as a stockbroker, 6 figures, in order to not earn money, but to spend money being a student, right? So that's something that's separate from the $1 million price tag of my education. And I'm saying this not to brag, right? But I'm discussing the cost of education and the benefits. Today, I'm going to focus on the benefits. I know it sounds so costly and exorbitant, but I'm saying it to help people who want to go to school in America, or who want to keep educating themselves, who want to create value. Today, my focus is on the benefits of the international education that I obtained by coming to study in America and studying in Europe as well. So let me get to it. I'm going to try and keep this video under 25 minutes. It's over 16 minutes already. So one last thing, and it's particularly painful for even American citizens and permanent residents. Green card holders have access to financial aid. That's one of the benefits. Once you're a permanent resident, a green card holder, you have excellent credit. The U.S. government will give you financial aid, so they could give you loans. That's one of the benefits of having a being responsible and working. Um, Having a good career, starting off a career at least in which you can pay your bills, you can be financially responsible, because your credit scores goes very high. There was a time my credit score was over 800, right? And your credit score goes very very high, and then the U.S. government, and other financial services will view you as being credit worthy, and they can give you a loan to finance your dreams. Some people go and use it to finance, buy a house, or or start a business. My business, what I viewed as an asset was education. So I went and acquired a very expensive education that I have no regrets about. I find it, it's absolutely was absolutely worth it. Um, so now, though, that the United States government is gutting, the Department of Education, and it's ending the ability of Americans to access student loans, that is, especially the middle class Americans, making education more out of the reach of middle class Americans and members of marginalized communities, minority communities. It's so sad. It is very very sad, because only the elite, the rich, the billionaires, they're the ones who can afford the cost of education, and education itself will start to. We may see that they start to plummet in. That's educational institutions. Universities may start to plummet when they don't have access to funding. Of course, there's the obstacle to obtaining international students right now because of visa. The government's banning of visas for certain nations, of F1 visas, and when this government is gutting uh, uh, the Department of Education, which used to provide financial aid and loans to American citizens and permanent residents. Then the middle class will have no access to go to school, and then these schools are just going to shut down, right? They're going to shut down. But of course, the schools also, I think they've done a disservice in over commoditizing education, and so that's something that I'm not in agreement. Something I I find upsetting that universities have just made education more expensive. They've over commoditized it, and in fact, the cost of getting an education in America is inflated. It's an inflation. It's at an inflationary price. You can definitely get the same level of education in a third world country, in another country, right? Certain that which at a far lower rate, at a far lower cost, lower price tag than you would obtain from America. So there's an inflation, an exorbitantly inflationary rate of obtaining an American education relative to the rest of the world, right? So, but today, what I'm going to just talk about is the benefit of my university education. I got a chance, coming to a school in America, I got a chance to interact with people from around the world, international students like me. And of course, American universities are a great destination and like a hub for uh, internationals, people from all over the world. Um, and it was one thing for me to have read about Chairman Mao Zedong when I was in Nigeria, and from a book written by uh, an English person, a Westerner. But actually, or it was another thing for me to have read about Napoleon Bonaparte. But it's something else for me to have actually met and lived with a Chinese person and get their perspective, what they think about Chairman Mao. I was lucky when I was in Troy. They had this program in which Chinese students came to spend 2 years in America and 2 years in their hometown, and they got 2 degrees, the Troy University and their hometown's university. So I had a Chinese student who was my roommate for a year. I had a Korean. I had Koreans who were that I lived with for over a year. I had I've lived with Indians when I was at Columbia University. I had an Indian roommate for a year. I had a a Jewish person as a roommate, a Jewish person from Brazil as roommate. Right. I've had I've lived with Indians again apart when I was in law school. Right. Um, who else? What other nationality? I've had a Kenyan when I was in Troy, Alabama, because I was on campus for a long time. I've had a roommate from Kenya. I learned about Kenya. Um, I've had my first roommate when I arrived in Alabama was a white guy from Australia, right? And he was a number one golfer. So I've had an Australian roommate. I had a roommate who was half Chinese, half white. Um, I had a Korean roommate. So, so I've lived with people from different parts of the world. When I was in Alabama, there was I lived in the international students housing, and there was a scholar in residence who was a professor of philosophy from China, and we became friends. And I used to invite him to my church, and he would teach me. We had discussions because very intelligent. I like intelligent people. I like to listen to them, pick their brain. And he would give me his perspective of China, what led to that was when China was started to develop. In fact, I was offered a job because the professor drew so close to me. He offered me a job to come and teach English at his university in China. I At that time, I was just an international student and I hadn't graduated. I didn't know America had other plans to keep me in America as well. Um, so I went. The MBA director, who became the vice chancellor of the university, he liked me a lot. I was very fortunate. I went and I asked him. I told him about the offer I received. He told me not to go. It would be like living out of a suitcase. I never went. I guess if I had gone, maybe that would have impeded my citizenship path or whatever in America. I don't know, but I didn't go. I didn't know what the future held for me because I was getting ready to graduate, and I got this offer to come and teach, uh, you know, English in China. Business English was what was offered, and the guy assured me that, look, I should forget the amount they were offering me. I remember it was 100 RMB, but my I wouldn't have. He said I wouldn't have to touch it because he said my housing would be free. I'd have an apartment, free housing. I didn't have to worry about rent or anything. So that the 100 RMB, this was no, it wasn't 100. It was 3,500 RMB. It was equivalent at that time to $100, and it was like, look, it's a lot in the university in the place I was going to be living in because it wasn't going to be Beijing or Shanghai. It wasn't one of those places. I don't want to say the name of the university, but he was like, apart from that um, business people, local business people will also hire, that the school has something that it helps one, their teachers to connect with local business people and they could teach them English, and those people will pay a lot of money. And it was like, look, I'll make far more money while there, but this is what the university will pay. But my professor, in a white American professor in Alabama at that time said, no, I shouldn't go. It would be like living out of a suitcase. That was what he told me. I didn't go, but so that aside, so there are these opportunities, right? I don't know if you can be driving a truck in Alaska or wherever, and then get an opportunity to go and teach business English to at a university in China. So you see, one of the benefits that I got from attending university, right? So you get these, and international living internationally, learning about people, other parts of the world, is something that interests me. By the way, I think I get a broader perspective. It makes me more broad-minded, and so I value that. Of course, I went to live in Europe and school in Europe, so I value that a lot. Um, so the exposure to people from around the world, I'd read about Chinese people, but here I was living with Chinese people in university. And I think if you're in your environment, your comfort zone, you're not going to go out of your way to go and live with somebody from another nationality and learn about them. I mean, that doesn't typically happen in Nigeria or in America. I I lived in Nigeria, in Lagos, Nigeria. There were Chinese. I had Chinese people who didn't live far from me. I never one day spoke with them. I didn't know what was on their mind or whatever. I never went into to their homes. There were Indians. We have a huge Indian population in Lagos, Nigeria. I had a friend. I had people who were Indians, classmates, in my school. I never once went to their homes or anything like that, right? So but in America, going to school, university, it's different. You can get to live with them, with people from another nationality, and then you can really get to get their perspective and know, more than what you've read in books about them, written by Western people, or what you've seen in movies, right, about them. Of course, when I grew up loving Bruce Lee and watching, Shaolin martial arts movies in Nigeria. And of course, look at me, foolish me. I thought, everybody, like Kung Fu was just a thing everybody did in China. But of course, I had to, when I, lived with Chinese people, and I talked to Chinese people, and the first thing that came to my mouth was about Bruce Lee, and they were offended. I found that, Chinese students were offended, and they thought Bruce Lee was not an intelligent person. That's what that was the perspective of my roommates, and they'd always talk about how he was not an intelligent person, blah blah blah, and so it's offensive to them. And I guess I learned. I learned to watch, not to stereotype people, right? Not to stereotype people by living with people who were different from me. And this was part of my university experience, right? So you get to learn about people from other cultures and interact with them and engage with them, right? So you learn to be very flexible. You learn to be able to adapt to people from another culture. So that's a benefit. I lived with people from different parts of the world, like I said, for long periods. I've lived with Indians for over a year. I've lived with Chinese over a year. I've lived with South Koreans for over a year. I lived with an Australian. I lived with white people. I've lived with different people. And It affords one to be flexible and adaptable. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about. The benefits of a university education, and that's priceless. This is now 30 minutes. I'm going to continue it in another video. My name is Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.